Thunder cracks and tempest howls. Tension in the fortress bowels. Bloody seer, barely living, peering upward, grimly giving partly whispered declarations. Dark signs in the constellations. Haggard seamster, far past breaking, hunting down a life for taking. Whittled femur, chiseled bone. Totem carver works alone. Sudden strikes from fists and nails. Battered victim screams and wails. The final blow as all abhor. The injured part explodes to gore. Mangled carcass, butchered chest. The gods put this one's soul to rest. Creeping feeling neath the skin makes seamster recognize his sin. He knows the sentence for this crime, an eldritch justice most divine. And as he waits for Tig's embrace, a force of darkness takes his place. These omens foretell death and fear. In Chantedfins, the 13th year. Good evening. Tonight, the dwarves of Chantedfins are in something of a crisis. A murder followed by a siege has rather caught us off guard. It's a grim way to start the new year. Right now, we need to focus on the invaders. There are a lot of dwarves outside, not to mention our entire rhinoceros herd. Evacuation will need to be swift to outrun the siegers. There's nothing quite like a rhinoceros stampede. Seems like everyone is making it in just fine. The drawbridge hasn't been sealed yet, they're cutting it a little close. 2 trolls have almost entered. Ha! The bridge snapped shut while they were on it, launching both into the air. Looks like one was propelled so high he actually cleared our wall. But the landing was pretty nasty. He's in no state to put up a fight. We're now safe from the siege, which is good because it's a pretty substantial one. Goblins and trolls swarm the surface in abundance. But even though we've locked away the attackers, the situation is still a bit dire. Now that the caves and the surface are sealed, our rhinos are all crowding into the main fortress area, where they aren't able to graze. If we don't get them something to eat, they'll soon start starving. Looks like it's time for our soldiers to clear the caves once again. Right now, our cavern is the feeding ground of Spoku Ngaxkazlu Renum, the Forgotten Beast. A huge 3-eyed mite. It has a spiral shell, and it undulates rhythmically. Its lavender blush exoskeleton is waxy. Beware, its deadly spittle. The beast doesn't honestly seem like much of a threat to our soldiers, especially since it already has been pretty heavily wounded by the cavern wildlife. We'll send in our cavern squad, the Pious Hand, immediately. They meet. Our soldiers pile on and end the creature quickly. With the bug dead, we can begin moving our livestock into the caves. There are a lot of animals to bring down, so it'll be a bit of work to get them all to the fungus pastures. With that squared away, it's time to deal with the invaders. We are going to make the goblins pay for this attack on our home. We have a special punishment for this siege. A horrific weapon that we've been saving for a special occasion. Locked away beside the crypt is perhaps the most impressive necromantic feat we have yet achieved. An undead forgotten beast. This is the corpse of Strabostasnos Stosbub Neguzlu. It has been locked in darkness for years, and has never been seen by the living. We now unleash this servant of death and disease, so that it may bring destruction upon our enemies. We are trying to lure it out using hounds as bait, but the creature isn't moving from its cell. However, the siegers are heading towards the newly opened tunnel, perhaps hoping to find a way into the fortress proper. The goblins inch through the tunnel warily, killing the dogs one by one. They hear strange noises further on, but they can't possibly know what waits for them. The invaders see something at the end of the tunnel. A pair of 2 enormous, lidless eyes. Suddenly, beak, feather, wing, and talon. The monster is upon them. They catch glimpses of the thing, but the tunnel is dark and cramped. Goblins are torn apart, as Strabostasno's broken heart gushes blood. But eventually, superior numbers win out, and the monster's head is cloven asunder. There is, of course, no actual route into the fortress through this tunnel, but just as the goblins begin to suspect that, the upper hatch is sealed. Near an entire goblin siege is stuck underground in one cramped tunnel, amongst the rotting carcasses of a forgotten beast, a half-dozen hounds, and the slain goblins. The few remaining goblins on the surface, cut off from the rest, are easily slain by the Gilded Graves. These undead warriors have dealt with far greater threats. The surface is now safe for our civilians, who get busy collecting wood, repasturing some of our livestock, and cleaning up the mess our soldiers made. The only question that remains is what's to be done with the invaders we've entombed in that foul tunnel. Zacit seems to have some ideas. But first, she has some other business to attend to. It's time to deliver justice to Tun, the weaver who murdered a bone carver at the beginning of the year. True, the murderer has already died of thirst, locked away in the crypt, but he has not yet fully served his sentence. Our mayor raises the dwarf's corpse to join the legion of bodies we've been amassing. And on that note, the dwarves begin working on some further improvements to our crypt. We may need to increase its capacity somewhat. But alas, it seems we'll need to make use of the crypt sooner than we had hoped. Another murder, this time by a different weaver, who killed an engraver in a fistfight. Our course is clear, the victim is reanimated, and the perpetrator is locked in the crypt. The dwarves return to their work. The goblins wait in the dark. Days turn to weeks, weeks to months. They survive on field rations, wondering if they'll ever leave this cursed place alive. Sounds can be heard on the other side of the wall. Digging, construction of some kind, and screaming. Some begin to crack under the pressure. To die in battle is one thing, but to be stuck in the dark and the dirt and the blood, with barely enough room to move around for months and months, few tortures could be more terrible. Any notion that this is a siege has long since passed. If those doors were to open, the invasion force would immediately leave these lands and never look back. But we can't send all these prisoners back into the hands of the enemy and reinforce their numbers. No, our mayor has a different plan. In the dark, they hear some old machines stirring. An opening has been created. Could this be freedom? But there's something on the other side. It's 8-foot, the cursed, wasting stalker mace dwarf. His silver mace has struck down many a foe. He had to be locked away from the rest of the fortress for years in case his curse spread to other dwarves. But we are in need of his services once again. He fights alone, as he always has. Bones crack under the force of his weapon. 8-foot has taken a few hits, but nothing serious so far. He has been training in the dark for many years, honing his skills day and night. He's inexhaustible due to his undead nature, making him able to outlast even overwhelming numbers of enemies. However, even with his enormous endurance, 8-foot is still being whittled down. The goblins have broken several of his bones, and he's being cut all over. Regardless, he's taken down the first group of goblins. 8-foot heads deeper into the tunnel to face the rest. Despite his injuries, 8-foot smashes through the other goblins one by one. Some try to flee in terror, some stand and fight, but all meet the same fate. And just when it seems like things can't get any more hopeless for the goblins, something starts happening to the wasting stalker. The full moon has risen. 8-foot is now a were-llama. His wounds have been healed, and he has been granted a great beastly strength. Still clutching his silver mace, the transformed 8-foot ascends towards the last remaining large group of goblins. But he's being pelted by crossbows. The goblins manage to overwhelm him with a sudden flurry of attacks, too fast for him to react. 8-foot is quickly beaten, stabbed, and shot to death by the goblin horde. He takes his rightful place in Tig's dark halls. There are still dozens of goblins left alive, but their spirits have been broken by this terrifying attack. Some have grown so haggard that they've begun throwing tantrums and sinking into depression. But the goblins have a strong defensive position in this part of the cave, strong enough to take down 8-foot. Perhaps there's still hope for them. Deep underground, another bizarre behemoth approaches our fortress. The forgotten beast, Sequel-Ngethok Bethos, has come. A great quadruped composed of milk of lime, a dissolved limestone solution. It has wings and it has a gaunt appearance. Beware its poisonous sting. We've seen few creatures as strange as this one. It's tall, white as death, and made of some liquid used in parchment production. Even more baffling, as the creature heads towards the fortress, it begins to melt away on its own. Without any of our soldiers ever meeting the beast, it simply falls apart into a soupy pool of lime water. Seeing such an enormous beast approach our fortress only to immediately destroy itself is quite unsettling, but it's better than being attacked by the thing. Only the gods know what this omen could foretell. As the goblins are engulfed by miasma from their rotting brethren, the exit is opened. Freedom at last. The smart ones quickly flee the fortress and never return. But several goblins decide to try their hand at revenge, and head towards our drawbridge. They are quickly put down by our wasting stalkers. Our soldiers descend into the tunnel and take down any remaining stragglers. The goblin attackers have been purged from the fortress after their harrowing experience in the tunnels. But even among those who escaped, horrors may still be in store for them. When 8-Foot was in werelama form, he bit several of the goblins before he fell. Among the escaping goblins may have been a few infected werelamas. When they return to their homeland, who knows what those beasts might bring. Now that the goblins are dead and gone, we can move on to the next phase of Zacit's plan. We're going to put all these corpses to good use. If we can raise these goblins, we'll have an entire army of zombies and wasting stalkers at our disposal. They may be difficult to control, but we can find a use for them, I'm sure. We'll also try to revive 8-Foot. The first batch of corpses are loaded into the crypt, and Zacit raises them. We got a number of goblin wasting stalkers, and they're pretty feisty. They're knocking everything around with force magic, including Zacit. Looks like 8-Foot was raised as a wasting stalker as well, and was somehow launched through the fortifications by the goblins. That makes things easier for us, because it means we don't have to go in there and pull him out manually. Zacit and 8-Foot make their escape from the crypt, while the zombies we just raised stumble into our cage traps. That was an unqualified success. If the rest of our resurrections go like that, we'll have our army in no time. Zacit was wounded by the wasting stalker force magic, so the doctors will need to fix her up before we raise the next batch of goblins. 8-Foot, meanwhile, has been locked behind a wall until we have time to get him back into his training grounds. Better safe than sorry. Zacit quickly recovers, and her reanimation plan begins in force. The dwarves dump massive numbers of goblin corpses and skeletons into the crypt, and Zacit raises the bodies. Cages are filled, hauled off, replaced, and the process continues. Summer turns to autumn, autumn to winter. We collect troll skeletons, goblin limbs, and all manner of reanimated viscera. But finally, the necromantic potential of this corpse pile dries up. The remaining bodies are simply dead flesh. The lifeless corpses are hauled off to be disposed of. We have secured a great many undead thralls this year. We've created many wasting stalkers from goblins and trolls, and even a wasting stalker parakeet man. These new troops need to be handled carefully. They hold no allegiance to Chantedfins, and will turn on us immediately if we give them the chance. But they're vicious warriors, and if we release them into a horde of our enemies, they'll be forced to fight on our behalf. They will destroy those who oppose us, as long as we don't let them destroy us first. The cursed year draws to its close, adorned with corpses, friends, and foes. The horrors witnessed, savage crimes, weigh heavily on dwarven minds. As spells are cast with blood and hate, their mental states deteriorate. Though madness threatens dwarves below, the mayor's hexes never slow. They will yet pay for all their sins, those cursed dwarves of Chantedfins.